I'm sure by now most, if not all of you, have seen the tragic news of the passing of Diogo Jota and his younger brother Andre Silva. It's always especially sad to see young talent go, and these two world-class footballers were no exception. I didn't want to make a video too quickly after news struck of their crash, because there wasn't much in the way of concrete information around it, but yesterday an update from police followed the tragic event. It seems that the Spanish police believe that the pair were speeding at the time of the crash, although this is still up for debate. We don't have any footage of Jota's crash itself, but when the photos of the wreck, or what was left of it, were published, many of you guys drew parallels to a crash we reported on a while back, wherein two men crashed a green Huracan at around 200 miles an hour, but somehow miraculously managed to survive. That's why today we're going to be comparing Jota's crash and everything we know about it with a very similar crash which happened about 10 years ago. Hopefully from comparing the two crashes we can understand a little bit more about what could have gone wrong. So here's what we've been told so far about Jota's crash. It was at around 12:35 AM on the A52 in the Zamora province. It's thought that Jota was driving, and after going for an overtake to get past another vehicle, one of the tyres blew, causing the car to lose traction at considerable speed before crashing into the side and catching on fire almost immediately. Crucially, there is currently an ongoing discussion between groups who have been trying to work out whether or not they were in fact speeding at the time of the crash. It's currently thought, based on a forensics-focused recollection of the event, that Jota was at the wheel of the Lamborghini driving over the limit when the tyre blew out. This is supported by a statement from the Zamora Civil Guard, which said the following. Among other things, traffic police from the Zamora branch of the Civil Guard are studying the tread marked by one of the wheels of the vehicle. Everything is also pointing to a possible high excess of speed over the permitted speed on that stretch of the motorway. All the tests carried out for the moment point to the driver of the crashed vehicle being Diogo Jota. The expert police report, when it is finalised, will be handed over to a court in Puebla de Sanabria. Now, the full investigation report hasn't been published yet, but based on this statement, it seems that they are currently firm on their belief that the crash happened at well above the speed limit. Whether or not the tyre of the Lambo would have blown out regardless is currently unclear. This current conclusion by the Spanish authorities doesn't line up with not one but two different eyewitness accounts which came out very recently. Firstly, there was a Portuguese lorry driver by the name of Jose Acevedo. He claimed that he was the driver who filmed the wreck on the A52. He said that when Jota's Lamborghini passed him earlier on that night, that they weren't speeding. Jose said after seeing the Huracan on fire shortly afterwards, he grabbed a fire extinguisher, but there was nothing he could have done to save them. Just as I'm writing this, an additional lorry driver said that they were on the A52 at the time of the crash. This individual said that the Huracan overtook him about 5 minutes before the accident, doing so at, and I quote, moderate speed. Now, these two accounts of Jota's driving at the night of the crash don't concretely prove that he wasn't speeding just before crashing, but given that these two accounts were a considerable distance from each other, and neither time were there reports that the Huracan was speeding, it's reasonable to assume that he wasn't exactly bombing it down the A52. What this driver did mention, as many others have pointed out too, is that much of the A52 is very poorly maintained and has been for years. Lopez Delgado, the president of the Spanish Association of Road Safety Auditors, or ASEVI, agrees and said that the condition of the road surface likely played a part in the crash. The shoddy road quality is further emphasized by the fact a 60-year-old woman crashed in almost the exact same spot 8 days prior to their crash, where she sustained serious injuries and needed to be cut from the wreckage. Two crashes just days apart in the same area. This could be a coincidence, but given average road safety figures across Central Europe, especially on dual carriageways and motorways, it's highly likely that the road conditions played a big part in both of these crashes. He did also note that speed likely played a part based on the visible skid marks on the road. He additionally explained that the tyre blowout doesn't solely explain the sheer magnitude of the crash. That is, it's unlikely that the blazing inferno that consumed the Huracan and its two occupants was solely down to the tyre blowing out, but also the driving conditions and speed. Lopez also noted that the way in which they seemed to have hit the central reservation barrier was quite head-on, meaning it did little to protect them. Barriers like these are designed mainly to deflect a more parallel crash rather than an almost head-on collision. So as it stands currently, that is pretty much all the information we have on Jota's tragic crash. Now let's take a look at the 200-mile-an-hour Huracan Crash, which happened several years ago. This happened back in September of 2014, way back when the Huracan first came out. In Hungary, on the M7 motorway, a Czech registered lime green Huracan was being driven extremely close to its limits, touching around 200 miles an hour. Another man sat alongside the driver, filming the road and the driver from his perspective. As the footage seems to show, there was a sudden dip in the road. Now at a normal speed this wouldn't be enough to cause a driver to lose control, but at 200 miles an hour the sudden change in the road was enough to cause the Huracan's weight to shift violently, causing the passengers filming to suddenly become shaky. It's at this point that the driver loses control due to the sudden weight transfer. The two occupants can be heard shouting briefly before the video ends and they crash. After losing traction, the Huracan smashed into the left crash barrier before it turns and hits the barrier opposite. When it hit the second barrier on the right, the car comes off the motorway at speed down a ditch. Miraculously, both of the occupants survived the huge impact of the crash. The driver, a 36-year-old man, managed to pull himself out of the wreckage and pulled the passenger out too, just before the Huracan caught fire and effectively burnt to a crisp. The driver was hospitalized by ambulance, and the passenger with more serious injuries was airlifted to a nearby hospital. Thankfully, both of the men survived this shocking crash, but they escaped by the skin of their teeth. This crash could so easily have ended in a completely different way. It's astonishing from looking at these photos of the aftermath that they both managed to survive the wreck. From what I can see, this was seemingly the first documented crash of a Lamborghini Huracan, which happened within months of the car's debut. From comparing the 2014 Huracan crash caught on video to Jota's more recent, tragically fatal crash, there are definitely some clear similarities, but also some very noteworthy discrepancies between the two. Firstly, there's the aftermath of the wrecks. Both Huracans looked remarkably similar in the aftermath, but this is mainly down to both of the cars burning. Had neither of these two Huracans caught fire, it's highly likely that the Hungary 200-mile-an-hour crash would have looked considerably worse. Now, apart from how the two wrecks looked afterwards and the fact they were both green Huracans, these crashes have little more in common. The biggest difference is, of course, the survival or lack thereof in each of the two crashes. Despite the crash in 2014 being likely at a much greater speed than Jota's, there was thankfully a window of opportunity which enabled the driver and passenger to escape before the car caught fire. On the other hand, it seems that in the Jota crash, the Huracan caught fire almost immediately, making escaping the car near impossible, possibly a bit like Paul Walker's crash.